Hey everyone, my name is Rainer and welcome back. So in this video post, often I get questions from traders out there, ask me, hey Rainer, how do you tell when a trend is ending? Then my answer always to them is that, no trader can consistently predict when a trend will end because honestly, I do not know when a trend will end. However, that being said, it does not mean that, you cannot anticipate or, be more cautious when certain things happen in markets because you can actually do that. And honestly, I cannot predict when a trend may end. But I usually use these two trading tools to guide me and to give me maybe a little preamp on when a trend could potentially be ending, right? So in this video, I'll share with you what are these two trading tools that I use to guide me along, to give me a little heads up on when the trend may be ending. But the disclaimer is this again, no traders out there can consistently predict when a trend will end. All they can do is just manage their downside and let the market do its thing. So without further ado, I'll share with you what are these two trading tools I use. So this is the daily chart of Euro dollar, and before I proceed on and share with you what the two tools I use, I'd like to share with you this one thing, right? This is it. Rome was not built in a day, and no real movement of importance ends in one day or in 1 week. It takes time for it to run its logical course, and this is said by one of the most famous speculator of all time, Jesse Livermore. So basically what he's trying to tell you is that, a trend does not simply end on the immediate reversal, right? And usually how a trend would usually end is something like this. It would trend pretty nicely, and it is very unlikely that it suddenly just pump, it reverse from there. All right, it does occur, but not very often. The more common scenario is actually this. All right, a trend were to trend normally, and just before it ends, what it usually do is this. All right, it will actually go into a range mode. All right, something like this. Right, you range for quite a while. Try to break out once more, fail, then you try to retest the lows, consolidate before reversing lower from here. All right, so usually after, I would say, a clue that a trend is weakening, or transiting into a reversal, is that a range market would be consolidated after a long-term trend, right? So when price is ranging, it's telling you that the bulls are bears and in control, and usually a trend would normally end, is when there is a range, a long period of consolidation, and price after that breaks off the range and start trading in the opposite direction. So that's usually more often the case in trading, on how a trend usually typically end, right? And this also goes and coincide with this saying over here, right? Rome was not built in a day, and no real movement or importance ends in one day or 1 week. So basically, it's telling you that a trend doesn't really end in one day or in 1 week suddenly. Rather, it takes time for it to to complete its course, before reversing from there. So with that in mind, right, let's look at a chart, right? So this is the chart of Euro dollar, and the two things I use, right, is, let me share with you. The first thing is this. I'll look at structure of the market. So because when you know that price is in a trend, say for example this is a downtrend, the structure of the market will be consisting of lower highs and lower lows. So it's very clear in this trend. We have lower highs over here, lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, and lower highs over here. So it's very consistent with what people call in a downtrend where price is making lower highs and lower lows. And if I look at lower lows, it's here, 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 and here. So yep, this is very consistent. So a clue to tell you that a market may be shifting from a trend mode to a range mode, right, is when we have a new structure created against the prevailing trend. So what could potentially, aware me that this trend may be weakening or, transiting into a range mode is when price, trades higher, taking out this obvious swing high over here, right, and closing higher, then it retraces, then it hits higher once more. So right now, if this happens, we have a series of higher lows and higher highs. So when this happens, it's a warning sign to me that, hey, maybe the trend is weakening. I wouldn't immediately conclude that the trend has ended, because like I mentioned earlier, usually trend doesn't end immediately. A trend usually, takes time to run its course, consolidate for quite a while before, reversing from there. That is like the most likely course of action. And so that usually, I would say, is at the back of my head. I wouldn't usually claim a trend will end immediately, but rather I would anticipate a consolidation before a price to reverse from it. So in this scenario, right, the euro dollar, which I've shown earlier, right, if there's a higher highs and higher lows against the current trend, then it's a clue to me. I know the trend is weakening and I could anticipate a range market going forward. And the second thing I use is this moving average. Right, as you know, the blue line is the 50 period EMA, the red is the 20 period EMA. I like to use the 20 and a 50. And it does give me clues, into the strength of the market. So how do I use the 2 moving average? The first thing is this, right? I like to look at the space in between, the 2 moving average, right? The distance between it, because as the trend is healthy and strong, you notice the space in between the 20 and 50 is pretty, spaced out. Pretty, I would say, a good space in between 20 and 50 period moving average. And usually when a trend, starts to, consolidate or starts to, turn a little, I would say, undecided, the moving average will start to get closer to each other, right? They'll start to get closer to each other. And this is, I would say, a sign for you to, pay attention to. Because when finally you get a crossover, right, a moving average crossover, it's telling you that, the trend is potentially weak at the moment, and, to stay on your toes to what may potentially happen next. So look at this chart, the euro dollar, right? Clearly, the 20 and 50, they are still pretty decently spaced apart. There isn't any sign of it narrowing yet, or have the 20 period crossing over above the 50. So if you ask me, this chart of the euro dollar is still pretty healthy from these 2 trading tools I use, right? In terms of structure and moving average, right? These two seems to confirm my view that this euro dollar trend on the daily is still towards the downside. So now let's look at another chart, right? This is the USD SGD, right? So one look at it, the trend is, alright, I'll say it's still up. However, it is starting to show a little clues, that the trend is weakening, right? I don't say it's going to reverse from now, but rather it's weakening, right? It could potentially, enter into a range market phase. I do not know, but it's something that it's at the back of my head and something that I'm really keeping a lookout for. So applying the 2 tools I mentioned earlier, right? Number one is structure, alright? So let's look at structure. So we have pretty higher lows over here, here, and this was a significant higher low over here. But what happened recently was that we had a close of this candle into this swing low over here. So basically what you have now is a support level around here, right? Here, you can draw this zone here. So you can see that the structure low is, I would say, okay, it's still intact. However, if price were to, trade lower and take out this support they have highlighted over here, then it's telling me to a sign that the trend is possibly ending, and it's either trading in a range or towards the downside. So what happens in this type of scenario is that whatever long positions are probably be stopped out already, and I wouldn't look to anticipate or establish any more long positions. So this is a clue from using structure of the market. Next up, let's look at the moving average of the USD SGD, right? You notice that it's getting tightened over here. 20 and 50 are trading pretty close to each other, and possibly if price does not rally in the coming days, right, you can anticipate that the 20 period moving average may cross below the 50 period moving average. So it's I would say a sign that telling me that the dollar against the Sing dollar, the rally seems to be weakening, and I'm anticipating a potential range market in the coming days ahead. So of course all this could be violated if price simply do this, right? Price could just trade higher, take out this swing high over here, then the uptrend resumes, and I will anticipate higher prices from then on. But till then, right now I'll probably highlight this support zone I've highlighted. Right, I'm paying attention to the moving average, paying attention to the structure of the markets, watching if this support area holds. Because if it doesn't hold, then it's telling me the market's chances are is transiting into a range market or towards the downside. So this is something to share with you guys. I hope you guys find this video useful, and I've really tried my best to explain to you when I think a trend may be ending. This is definitely not foolproof, right? Because in the markets, we are dealing with probabilities, never certainties, right? Even a likely scenario, say for example, price, all right? Let's say this could even happen. This is a structure I've highlighted, right? 20 period could cross below the 50 period moving average, right? Then you see that price close below this structure over here, right? Then most traders will conclude that, break of structure, right? Price is in a downtrend, right? And the next thing price could actually rally back above and trade above this swing high once more. This is very possible. I mean, this is possible. I mean, anything could happen in markets. So I always emphasize on managing your downside. Always have a protective stop loss, because the markets, I repeat, the markets can do anything, and you always want to manage your downside, right? So if you guys enjoy these videos, enjoy this video of mine, feel free to hit the subscribe button on the top right hand corner. And I wish you guys good luck and good trading. I'll talk to you soon.